Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar, which is all about how to improve product adoption in global markets and why better localization makes a difference. It's great for you all joining us today, and I hope this session is very, very useful for you. It should hopefully be a swift 30-minute session. Let's get started. First things first, my name is James. I'm head of commercial here at Comtec and a member of our senior leadership team, where I've developed a specialty in marketing localization, notably for SaaS, product marketing, and retail teams. I spent years working with high growth brands on how language shows up in their customer service, their customer experience, marketing, sales, and software. It's something I'm really passionate about, so it's great to have the chance to talk with you all about this today. As mentioned, in today's session, we're looking at how to improve product adoption in global markets and why better localization makes a difference. We often see in SaaS environments, particularly when it comes to the software itself, the temptation to work with out-of-the-box AI-only translation plugins, which are available via these plugins. But there's a lot of evidence that means this approach to translation and localization is not always your best bet. So in the next half an hour, I want to talk you through a few things to help you improve your localization process. So first of all, we're going to look at where localization issues tend to show up in a SaaS environment, why they often appear first in user behavior. We're also going to look at where product adoption starts to break down when language issues introduce friction. We're going to look at what good localization actually looks like across a full product journey. Why terminology and consistency of terminology matters so much for a SaaS product. The role of AI machine translation in SaaS, so where it works well and where human expertise still really matters. And finally, how to focus your localization efforts on the areas that really influence adoption and retention, rather than giving everything the same treatment. So on that note, let us get started. So one of the reasons I've chosen to talk about this topic today is that SaaS teams expanding into different markets often see a very similar pattern, especially if, as mentioned, they're potentially using an AI translation plugin off the shelf. Activation might be lower than expected. Users might seem more hesitant during onboarding. Support queries might go up as a result. Engagement takes longer to build, and there's slower feature adoption at play as well. Often these issues are misinterpreted potentially as product, UX, marketing challenges, which of course they could well be. But language and how the copy has been translated or localized often plays a much bigger part of the picture than teams realize, which is why getting it right is so essential. And these problems often don't come up as localization issues when perhaps validating internally. They show up in user behavior. So they don't move through the product as smoothly as they would in the original language. And that's where commercial impact starts to kick in. So what is actually happening when a product moves into another language and the translation or localization method you've selected isn't perhaps quite working right? For these examples, as I mentioned at the start of the webinar, let's imagine that for your software app or platform, you're accessing out-the-box machine translation via a plugin you perhaps purchased and attached to the software. But some issues can occur with this approach. For example, even if the functionality of your translated app is exactly the same, the customer experience might not be. Small points of friction might appear. For example, a UI label might be technically inaccurate, but it's still not contextually right. A feature description might be a little bit too literal or read unnaturally. There might be differences in language and terminology between help articles and the software itself. Or, for example, instructions that might feel simple and accessible in English become confusing and convoluted in a target language. Altogether, these things build up and users start to feel less sure of what they're doing in the product. This is where they perhaps rely more on support, and you'll see customer service and support inquiries ramp up. And essentially, in more complex products, it's even more important because precise language is so crucial of how users learn the product in the first place. So let's bring this to life a little bit and look at some real life examples of where these issues show up. So first of all, inconsistent feature naming. You might have a feature translated one way in the UI and another way in the help center. Very common occurrence when working with out-the-box untrained AI, and that immediately introduces uncertainty. You just start wondering whether those two things are actually the same. Um, there might be an unnatural CTA as well. Your CTA might be technically correct, but it might not feel natural. It might not be how you talk as a business. There's always these subtle nuances in terms of how you want customers to react, and interact with your product. So it might not prompt the action you're looking for. And also literal translations. You might have onboarding instructions that are clear and concise in English, but actually they're a bit stiff and ambiguous when translated. All these things do create friction and kind of add to the things we've talked about already. For example, slower onboarding, reduced feature adoption, increased support tickets, and overall lower engagement, which is absolutely not what not what you want at all for your localized product. So these are some of the issues that can show up when the translation method you select isn't perhaps quite right for your product and your customers. So let's look at what good localization actually looks like. So I've got a few things to talk you through that kind of really explain this really nicely. Good localization essentially creates a consistent, natural, and trustworthy experience for your customers across the whole product journey, from your original marketing and your customer service all the way through to your product itself and all the help documentation. Some things that are great in translation in terms of what good is consistency. So the same terms for your products or key terminology are being used across all of your content, whether it's the user interface, your onboarding content, help content, documentation, etc. It creates that consistency of understanding. Clarity and usability. So language is intuitive and easy to act on. It's not just a word for word literal translation. On that note, tone, brand voice, style as well. Content sounds natural and appropriate for the market, not just a word for word translation, which users can usually see through. Cultural fit as well. There's always subtle differences in phrasing, nuance, etc., that are respected for each market, and formality levels as well. So making sure those things, when they're aligned, they really do create that authenticity. And finally, continuity as well. Everything feeling like it comes from the same place. So to summarize, if I could summarize this in a few words, good localization makes the product feel fit for the market and not translated into it. One of the points I just want to really just hone in on before we move on is around terminology. As mentioned, I work with a lot of SaaS brands in very specialist areas from fintech, edtech, a whole range of sectors. And one thing I notice is that SaaS content, whether it's the user interface or the product documentation, the marketing, it more often than not contains a mix of both highly technical and sector-specific terminology. And it's crucial to get this right. The reason is terminology is not just a language translation detail, it's usability. Can your product be used and understood? When terms for in your product or your features are handled consistently, that's when onboarding becomes easier to follow. That's when user experience improved, support conversations become simpler, and the whole product and experience feels really coherent. When terminology varies or is inconsistent across your different pieces of content, for example, you might have had some of your team members internally translating some parts of the content. You might have used AI for some, and you might have outsourced to a translation agency for other parts. That's where inconsistencies can come in. And this is where the opposite happens. So users hesitate, support queries go up, internal stakeholders and reviewers are actually spending time revising the translation. And overall, this slows adoption. So one thing I'd really recommend to any SaaS teams in tenants today is make sure you're managing your terminology really strongly. We always recommend having a glossary of key terminology as extensive as possible that's shared across your marketing, your user interface, all your help documentation, and any other documentation you have involved, and you have translated approved versions of each of those. It's not just there to help translation quality, it just creates a more intuitive experience and a smoother experience for all your customers across all languages, but also your teams managing this internally as well. So, I wanted now to talk about AI because I've mentioned it already in terms of out-the-box AI. But AI, for example, in a SaaS environment does have value. Um, what are the things that AI is good for? It's good for speed, scale, and efficiency, especially for high volume content. For example, release notes, support center, help centers. This is where I've seen brands invest in AI well in a SaaS perspective. Um, but also very important to remember, on its own, AI does not understand your product logic. It does not understand certain tool terms, cultural nuance, or style and tone as well as a human does. And that's where a human, a professional linguist in this context, and their expertise is essential. So I wanted to be really clear about what human expertise is in an AI world. There is a myth that sometimes human translators don't do anything when it comes to AI, but that's actually not true. So when we talk about AI at Comtech, it's very different to AI you might procure via a plugin or one of the more cost-effective or free tools you might find online. Our linguists essentially are incredibly important at both ends, both pre-AI and post-AI translation. Um, Pre-AI linguists are shaping your terminology, your brand voice, ensuring consistency across content types. They're refining the AI language for usability and clarity. And at the following AI translation, they're doing a very similar project. They're editing in the AI translations to make sure these really sing for your brand. They're capturing the nuance. They're really capturing your brand language. Any lack of context in the AI is revised and edited out. So um, humans have a very important role even when it comes to AI. And this is absolutely not a human versus AI conversation. Both have their benefits, absolutely. And the most effective approach is a combination of both, which is what we're going to look at next. So on this next slide, I've shared with you our content categorization pyramid. So, one of the biggest mistakes, teams can make, and that's not just SaaS teams, it's any team, whether it's marketing, technical, in all different industries. A big mistake they can make is treating all content as it needs the same translation or localization approach. Traditionally, going back 5, 10 years, everything or the majority was done by human translation. There's obviously in the last couple of years, with the rise of AI, temptation to run everything through AI. And in this current environment, where budgets are tight, turnaround times are tight, and content needs different approaches, neither approach is actually the best for every single piece of content. So this framework, essentially, we put this together because we feel different types of content deserve different treatment. And this pyramid helps clearly set out what those three levels are. So I want to talk you through each of these sections. So at the bottom of the pyramid, level one is your AI or machine translation. Now, as mentioned, AI translation can be great for high volume, low risk content. In a SaaS environment, for example, this could mean your functional, instructional, repetitive copy where good enough is good enough. But at the same time, when we're talking about AI as a translation company, we mean customized AI. That's been programmed by professional linguists in line with your terminology and brand style. This is significantly different and much more powerful, accurate in line with your brand than what you'd receive via an AI plugin or one of the tools that you can access online personally. So AI has a really great place for speed and efficiency, but we'd always recommend customization to eliminate as many risks as possible from an AI-only approach. In the middle is what we call hybrid translation. And this is becoming much more popular for teams who are looking for the benefits of AI in terms of speed and scale, but also the human touch. So this section is AI translation or machine translation with human post-editing. Now, post-editing is essentially a detailed review by a professional linguist of the AI output. We're also frequently seeing teams requesting two linguists to refine the output. So the traditional model of human translation and proofreading is still captured with that two linguist approach, but with the addition of AI at the start of the chain as well. Essentially, their role is essentially the same in as level one, powering the AI and then completing one or two rounds of post editing to check context, make sure the meaning is correct. I know any inaccuracies that have come from the AI and making the content sing. This is perfect for content where both clarity and consistency are important. And at the top, we have level three, which is fully human translation and localization. This involves no AI at all. This is pure professional linguist translation, transcription, localization, depending on the content. Fully human, as we call it, is still the best approach for high impact, high visibility content. Anything that's super critical, I'm thinking about your marketing content in particular, where you're really trying to shape the user's first impression and confidence. This is where professional human translation really makes the biggest impact. So I'm certainly recommending this approach for kind of high impact, high trust content, where the cost of getting it wrong is lower, it's higher than the investment make. But the aim by using this pyramid is not to overinvest in everything. It's to apply the right approach and the right level of effort to the places that directly affect customer experience and product adoption. And the best strategies I've seen when it comes to localization are teams that use all three of these interchangeably in the right areas. So let's start to summarize what we've learned today. So how can SaaS teams apply these learnings around translation and localization? I've included on the screen kind of a five-step journey, which I want to talk you through. So first of all, I'd recommend starting with your product language. I mentioned glossaries and terminology earlier on. This is super important, and I cannot stress enough the importance of establishing a really clear glossary, as extensive as possible, that's worked on with your translation partner and their professional linguists and agreed by your team. That becomes the foundation of everything in terms of how you talk as a brand. The second step is looking at your key user journeys. So identifying which areas need the most attention, whether it's onboarding, whether it's your marketing materials, for example, which areas need the highest efforts when it comes to localization. Thirdly, it's looking at your approaches to translation. If you've identified your high impact content or your crucial content, that's potentially where you will invest in human translation. But it's also looking at where AI translation or post-edited AI translation, hybrid translation can make a real big impact as well, where you need the content to be just good enough, or whether you need that human review as well for full clarity and experience. Fourth, I actually recommend making localization a cross-functional conversation. When I've seen SaaS teams I work with get this really right, is that when localization is consistent across their product team, product marketing team, general marketing team, and their SaaS and their internal comms as well, when everyone's singing from the same hymn sheet, both in terms of the approaches, terminology, and style, that's where I see the product really deliver globally. So that's definitely a big recommendation from me today. And finally, keep refining over time. The product will evolve, new features will be launched, you'll launch new marketing campaigns, you might launch more languages into new markets. So it's language is always an evolving conversation, just like your product. So definitely keep refining those four steps, whether it's updating your glossary, looking at what's working, what's not working, and perhaps experimenting with different language solutions, whether more human effort is needed, or there's some areas where you can use AI more. So definitely keep experimenting and getting the mix right over time. And that's where a good partner can help you as well. So a few things just to remember: localization should not sit in isolation. Your product teams and your marketing teams are great for influencing the source content. So they're great people to get on board with your terminology and glossary creation. Your marketing team as well, they also can really help shape the messaging that feeds into localization. So I'd absolutely get them on board for from a style and tone perspective across both the UI and all the other comms around it. Customer success can also see where users are struggling. So they're great people to check in with to see, are there particular languages where we're seeing they might not be right? Are there certain areas where people are struggling with or maybe not engaging with? Um, and the reason being is the localization often starts with really great internal alignment. And I've seen this work so well for so many SaaS companies I work with. So I'd absolutely recommend the same thing. So, if I had to summarize the main message today, when expanding into new markets, you're not simply translating your product, you're creating user experience in another language. And differences in language can have a bigger impact than you potentially think on your customers. So, better localization is all about focusing the right effort in the right places, the moments that shape user behavior, and combining technology with all the great professional expertise you can get. So the customer experience feels clear, natural, and trustworthy in every market. And you're also meeting your commercial goals in terms of making your budget work for you and making you and helping your team to kind of meet your launch times as well. So that's my main message for today. So, if translation and localization are things you're looking at the moment, for example, if you are thinking of expanding into a new market, or you're already translating your content, and perhaps you've had some challenges, or you just like to kind of look at where you can make use of perhaps some of the solutions we've talked about today, there are a couple of ways we, as a translation partner, can help you. First, we're always able to offer free samples. One thing that we often work with our clients when we're onboarding them is taking a piece of content and translating it according to different methods. For example, the three we talked about in the pyramid earlier today. This gives our clients a really concrete view to see how different localization approaches perform and which approach might be best for each piece of content. The other is looking at your current localization approach. We are more than happy to help you if you'd like to book in a call with us so we can look at where user experience might be affected, how you're currently managing terminology, if there's any plugins you're using or any automation you can use to support the management of translations, and also what solutions you're operating as well. So please feel free to email me or connect on LinkedIn if either or both of these are of interest and you'd like to chat further. So that is everything from me today. I've got my my contact details on the screen, and there's plenty we can support you if you'd like to get in touch. But before we wrap up, it would be great to hear from our audience if you have any questions. I'll stop sharing my screen so I can see your faces. Cool. It doesn't look like we have any comments from the audience, but in that case, please always feel free to reach out to me. As mentioned, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. My email is also shared as well. I'll also be in touch for this webinar with the recording and the slides. And please ever reach out to us if you ever need any support with your localization setup. There's so many ways SaaS teams can really supercharge localization and make it work great for their brand. So, on that note, have a fantastic day, everyone, and I will speak to you soon. Take care. Goodbye.